have to stand up strong, face the truth about themselves, to understand what went wrong. I know we can find a way. I know we can find a way. I know we can find a way to stand up, stand up, stand up. I know we can find a way. I know we can find a way.
Oh, that's real nice. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Jesse Peterson Show. I am Jesse Peterson. Tonight, we're talking about a very important issue, I think, that I believe and hope that it will have a great positive impact on our country and especially on the black community. We're talking about affirmative action. In California, there's an organization that is trying to, I can't hardly hear myself, that is trying to change the laws of the affirmative action. So we're going to be talking about that tonight. My guest today is Molly Munger with the Legal Defense and Education Fund of the NAACP. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. Are you nervous?
Oh, yes.
You are? Why?
Well, I don't do this kind of thing most of the time.
Oh, okay. Well, you can relax. You're amongst enemies. Tell us a little bit about your job and what do you do for the NAACP?
Well, I'm one of the attorneys in the Los Angeles office of the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. We have 5 lawyers, and what we do most of the time is we litigate cases under the Civil Rights Act and other provisions of the law that are intended to make the Constitution a live and real thing for people.
Mm-hmm. This whole issue with affirmative action, what is your impression or the NAACP impression of what is happening right now?
Well, our impression is that over a long period of time, the country evolved a certain set of tools that were proven to be and have been very effective in not eradicating, we certainly haven't eradicated, but reducing the level of discrimination that women and people of color face in their work and other aspects of their lives. And what we think is happening is that as these tools are proving very effective, we have hit a kind of nasty pocket in the economy, and people are reacting to that by turning against first the Latinos and under Proposition 187 here in California, and now this new California initiative lashing out at women and people of color.
And when you say proven to be effective, give me an example of that.
Well, let's look at affirmative action in the workplace. First of all, there's an enormous definitional problem with affirmative action. We're all of us, before we get deeply into this subject, I think, not really clear on what is this thing called affirmative action. Affirmative action can be defined either narrowly or quite broadly. If you define it narrowly, you would say it's only those programs and policies where there is an actual preference or some kind of rigid quota or set-aside given on the basis of race, gender, or ethnicity. That actually, that definition is the one that the proponents of this initiative like to use when they go out into the world to drum up support for their initiative. It's only a narrow thing, don't worry, it just gets rid of quotas and preferences that aren't fair to people, don't worry about this. But actually the way they've written it is much broader, so that it covers a more broad definition of affirmative action, which would be any program that even considers in any way the race, gender, or ethnicity of people. For example, this initiative would end voluntary desegregation programs in our public schools. And that's because the way you integrate a public school today, there is no more forced busing. And the way you do it now is you create interracial magnets and you try to balance the kids in the school in a racial basis. Well, of course, that's ended under this initiative. There's also a lot of recruiting that people do. We go out when we notice that our police department has virtually no Korean officers, and we have a large and growing Korean community. We go to the Korean community and we try to recruit members of the Korean community to join the police department. We go, send people out, and that would also be ended because that's a special treatment to the group according to the way they've written it.
How about the Civil Rights Act? Isn't that supposed to cover all of us?
It is.
I mean, so why do we need another law besides just that, the affirmative action law? Why do we need that at all, as opposed to using the civil rights law?
Well, Jesse, that's a very good question, but it also has a very good answer, which is that affirmative action is just the name that has, in one definition of it, it's just the name that has been given for the way you enforce the Civil Rights Act. And I want to give you an example of that. When a man goes to look for work under a legal system in a country where there is a rule that he should not be discriminated against, and he's turned away for that job, he doesn't know why. He doesn't know why. He doesn't know who got the job. He doesn't know what kind of games they were playing with the qualifications. He just knows he didn't get the job. He can't sue. There's no teeth to a law that just says thou shalt not, because nobody who gets turned away really can prove it. Mm-hmm. Very early on, back in 1964 when they started the Civil Rights Act, there had been some early state experimentation with fair employment laws, and they knew they weren't working. And so what they did is they said, look, you big employers, you have a lot of employees, you report to the EEOC how many women, how many black people, how many Latino people, how many Asian people. You tell us at every job level what you've got. At no quota, no rigid rule, nothing, just a report. Why? Because if you have to report to the EEOC, it's embarrassing. You got a steel mill in an area that's a 50% qualified black workers, and you got 2% black men in there. That's, those men are being turned away, and they have no way of proving it or getting any redress. And so we needed to put some teeth into the law. We knew that, and we did it in 1964 by requiring people to keep track of their numbers.
Who is upset about this with this law and want to change it at this point? Well,
two people who are most upset about the law and who want to change it are two people who wrote a truly nasty book early this year, or actually last year, Richard Herrnstein and Charles Murray. Their book, The Bell Curve, was widely publicized as a racial hate book. It was a book about how black people were innately and naturally inferior to white people. The book was so loathsome that it was roundly condemned by all the responsible people in the nation. It turned out that it had been funded, the research in it had been funded by people who were on record as admiring the Nazi Party, and there were a lot of neo-eugenicist, very strange people behind that book. I personally did not, pardon me?
No, don't worry. We'll get to the audience.
Okay. I personally, Jesse, did not pay much mind to that book, and time passed, and we got involved in this affirmative action problem. I pulled out the book, just curiosity one day. Turns out that book, which was publicized as being about, racial hatred, had been written as an attack on two things: affirmative action and all anti-discrimination laws in the United States. And why had it been written as an attack on both things? Because they're related. They are related. Affirmative action really is just a more stiff version of how we have to enforce all of our employment laws. The reporting requirement that I was describing to you, if that employer and this did happen. This is how affirmative action in the rigid sense came to be. If an employer is guilty of hardened, repeated, blatant racial discrimination and simply will not open his or her doors, then a case can be made in court to prove the discrimination. And as a remedy for the discrimination, the court can say, from now on, until you get your numbers to match your community and the qualified workers in your community, you will hire so many people. Now that is what people, that's a quota, and everybody's all freaked out about that, and they say that's a bad thing. But what happened was, they went into it, and a few people, they said, I don't care. So I have to report my numbers to the EEOC. I just report my little 2%. Nobody's going to hurt me. And so certain people just kept on doing it, and it was the Nixon administration, with the construction trades unions in Philadelphia refusing to open their doors to the many black workers in Philadelphia. And finally the Nixon administration said, look, it's very simple. You want a federal contract? We're sick of talking to you about this. You want a federal contract? You just get your numbers up. So Nixon was the first person who put in a kind of a rigid number situation.
I want to ask you more about the book, and then I want to ask you about the colleges, the universities around town, around the country. The book.
Yeah.
Do you personally think that a lot of black people disagree with that book, or agree with it, most of what it had to say?
I don't know. I don't know any black people who think that they're naturally and innately inferior to white people. Do
black people seem to be insecure or inferior in a way? Do you see a problem with black people at all, as though something is wrong?
I guess I'm not understanding, Jesse.
I noticed that black men,
yes,
and my thing is dealing with the man,
yes,
he seemed to be inferior. He seemed to be shy, and not all of them, but most of them seem to be shy and insecure, and is not able to deal with life in a manly way. Have you noticed that about black men?
Well, no, I haven't.
You haven't?
No, I haven't.
Affirmative action has been around for a long time now, and it has not had a positive impact on the black community. Have you noticed that?
Well, no, I would argue that.
It has?
That I have something to say
It seemed to have helped the black female more so than the male.
Well, no, I don't think so.
What kind of positive effect has it had on the black community?
Well, you got the steel mills open. You got all kinds of blue collar jobs that used to be closed are open. You got places in the white collar world that were totally closed for years are now open. I just think that if you have an entire black middle class in this country, having started out this century with a situation where 89% of black people were in terrible poverty, mostly in the South, working for slave wages, in bondage to people who ran these old plantations. It was a bad situation, and you look at it 95 years later, and black people have really achieved so much. They have really done a wonderful job. I don't believe in beating up on what the black people have accomplished.
Really? Well, how do you explain most of them, not all, but most who get into these companies, start at the top end and is not able to perform? They only got there because affirmative action made it possible.
That's not what happens by and large. That's a very, I don't even know how that would happen. It would be a very aberrant, odd thing that would happen. What really happens is that black people continue to be overqualified for virtually every level of employment that they're at, because they're not given credit for the level of educational attainment they reach. They make about $75 for every $100 the white person has of the same educational level. And so, it's just a myth that there's somehow a whole lot of qualified black people, running amok at the upper levels of our society. The upper levels of our society, Jesse, just continue to be hugely dominated by white men. That's who's there. White men.
White straight men. Let's not forget.
Yes, I think that's true too. White straight men, or white men who are appearing to be straight.
Really, this attack on affirmative action, if I can call it that for a minute, seemed to be motivated by those white men who feel that they are being discriminated against. Do they have a legal defense? Are they right in what they are feeling?
No, they're not. They're not by and large right about what they're feeling. They're in a country as big as ours. Could you say there has never been a situation where a white man was treated unfairly because a woman got the job? Can you say that never happened? You can't say it never happened. The country's too big.
Right.
But is it a phenomenon that is just widespread, that is wreaking havoc with the fairness in our society? It isn't. For one thing, anybody to whom that happened would have a right to sue. And I would have to say that where that is largely claimed to occur is not like in my example where the guy gets turned away at the factory gate.
Mm-hmm.
That particular complaint is largely about promotions. And that particular complaint, you do know all the facts. You knew who was in the competition with you. You knew what the job consisted of. You knew what the qualifications were of yourself and the other person. If you thought you had such a great complaint for discrimination and promotion, you should sue. And they don't sue, and there aren't a lot of those cases. And Jesse, it's because there are not a lot of those injuries.
Really, we're going to take a break, and when we come back, I want to ask about the university.
Okay.
We'll take a break and be back in a moment.
It's electric! Bond, the brotherhood organization of a new destiny. Rebuilding the family by rebuilding the man. Call us toll-free, 1-800-411-BOND. That's 1-800-411-BOND.
Okay, we are back, and I'm talking with Molly today from the Legal Defense and Education Fund of the NAACP. Molly, I know a lot of black, what do I want to ask first? Oh, let's talk about the universities. A lot of black kids have gotten into these schools by way of affirmative action, and they have not earned their way to get there. And so as a result, they have had to lower the standard in order to allow these kids to come in because of affirmative action. Is that fair to black people?
Well, first of all, let me say what is happening here in California. We have a rule in California that the top 12.5% of our high school graduates by grade point average can go to a University of California campus. Mm-hmm. There has not been any softening of that requirement for anybody on any basis, racial or otherwise. Today in California, if you are not in the top 12.5% of your high school class, you do not go to the University of California, and if you are, you can. What is being talked about is something that happens at Berkeley and UCLA and a few of the University of California campuses, which are in great demand and therefore usually take students that are not just in the top 12.5%, but maybe the top 7. I don't know that number, but it's the higher end of the 12.5%. And when they do that, if they do it strictly on grades, then what happens is they don't have, and actually what they do is they use test scores as well. They do it strictly on grades and test scores to figure out who's high like that. Then disproportionately they exclude African Americans who do not score as high on the tests. Now, if you want to believe Herrnstein and Miller and Murray, they say the African Americans don't score as high on the test because they're genetically, racially inferior human beings. And I don't believe it.
Why do you think they don't?
Well, here's what we know that I think is very interesting. The achievement test gap between black and white students has narrowed enormously in the last 20 years. The achievement test gap is half of what it was. It is narrowing very rapidly. And Rand Corporation has recently done a study where they documented this very large drop with these rather dramatic charts that where they said based on certain factors, we would expect black achievement scores to rise by this much. And then you turn the page and they're out like this. Black achievement scores are way, way up. And so I guess what I'm saying is there is no reason why black kids can't achieve. They can, and they do achieve. However, there is a remaining gap that it's narrowing, but there is a remaining gap. And what the universities do is they say, well, look, we'll just go slightly lower in order to diversify our class. And the kind of kids that they're taking, they're taking high-scoring kids from inner-city schools. Inner-city schools are under-resourced. They do not have the same resources as rich white schools in the suburbs. And you can have worked your heart out. You can have done every assignment you were ever given. You can have turned in every piece of homework. You can have high grades, and you can still score low because you haven't been in as enriched an educational environment. And the people in the universities know that, and they say it's not fair. It's not fair that the black kids are all ghettoized in these inner city schools where they don't get the same kind of education, and then they don't score as high on the tests, and then they come to apply to Berkeley, and they can't get in. The people who run those admissions departments say that isn't fair. We're just not going to let that happen, and they give them a few points. They spot them a few points. And I just don't think that's unfair.
But I think that if they don't earn it, they shouldn't get it. I think that if those kids are not scoring to reaching whatever it is that the college need for them to enter in, they should not enter in. They should go back and try again later. Study harder or try harder. I don't think they're dumb. I just think they're lazy. Most black kids are very lazy because over the last 40 years or so, we've been told, or they've been told, I have too, that you really don't have to do your best because we do have affirmative action and we're going to give you something. So with the mindset of knowing that they can get something for nothing, it causes them not to try as hard as a white kid would. But
I don't know. I used to live in this interracial neighborhood, and I had a lot of black kids who were teenagers who were babysitters for my kids. Mm-hmm. And it was not my observation that they were lazy students. In fact, it was my observation that those kids were working hard all the time because they realized they lived in a society that wasn't going to treat them fairly, and their education was even more important to them than it was to the white teenagers in that same neighborhood. Jesse, I just don't think you're being fair.
Would they let a white kid in who didn't quite meet the standard? Would they say, okay, he's white, so let him come on anyway?
Well, I'll tell you what they do. And all the big universities in the country do this. I don't know, do they all? Many. When you have a kid from any background, let's say he's a white kid from a coal mining town in Appalachia, his school is terrible, he hasn't gotten a good education, he has to walk miles to school, his school day's shortened, he has all kinds of deprivations, but he's just killed himself to do well, he's done all the work, he's got good grades, he's got wonderful recommendations, and then he goes to take the test, he doesn't do as well. Colleges take him.
Oh, they take him.
Oh, absolutely. And so what happens for African American kids and Latino kids really isn't that different than what happens in our country for socioeconomically deprived white kids.
I know many kids that, not many, but some kids at Berkeley, for example, who only got there because of affirmative action, and they had to drop out. They realized that they couldn't handle it because they didn't have the motivation that it took to really study and sacrifice pleasure for what they wanted. And I just think it's so unfair that they got in there by way of affirmative action. It seemed as though, I don't know, I get the impression that a certain group of people in this country, and I'll use the term liberal people, they seem to think that blacks are weaker or don't have the capability to really make it in this society, and they seem to be trying to make it easy for us, which is literally destroying us as opposed to helping us. And I think that's why you see such destruction in the black community today, because we have not earned our way.
Well, let me respond first of all to your observation about the dropout situation at Berkeley.
Yes.
I don't know exactly what the numbers are at Berkeley, but I shared your concern. I was concerned. When I first started hearing about this affirmative action at the universities, I was worried too. I thought, it doesn't do a person a favor if they're, into over their head where they shouldn't be. Well, once I realized that the top 12.5% is all who's there, so that everybody's qualified to be there. There's nobody there who's not qualified. We're only talking about whether they're going to Berkeley or UC San Diego. I mean, that's not a big thing. I was calmed, and then I went to look at what the completion rates are. And although black completion rates at Berkeley and at other schools are not as high as white completion rates, the gaps are not huge. I mean, it's like the difference between 2/3 and a half. 2/3 of white kids finish college and 50% of black kids finish college. And, you know, when you're a black kid on a campus today, you can be shouted racial taunts. They have burned crosses in front of black dorms. They have scribbled racial epithets on dormitory walls. They've blackened the face of a doll and hung it from a noose in a dormitory stairway. There's lots of ways. The LA Times has done a big study on how much racial hatred is on campus. And so, you know, I think with that climate going on, if you have a slightly higher dropout rate for the blacks who are up against that kind of thing, I mean.
But that's because white kids are upset. They have to work hard and they have to earn their way, and they see another group of people coming in and just having it easy. But I do want to add that I think, yes, racism is there, but black kids are as mean and nasty and angry as those white kids are. They have the Black Student Union. They're always getting together and trying to plot as one how to, you know, get back at the white man. They spend too much time on that kind of stuff. So it's coming both ways and not necessarily just from the white people.
Well, that's a fair observation. And I realize that once a fight starts, there's two sides of it. I know that. But the question that I have is who started it? If you look at how
that still shouldn't matter. I mean, if somebody, I'm sorry to cut you off, but it still want to, you know, it seems as though you still want to excuse us, you know, for, let's say the white man did start the fight. Why should I spend my time trying to fight back with him when I'm trying to finish school?
Well, all right. Let me respond to, first of all, to this business of the who started it, because I think it's an interesting fact of educational history. We had for hundreds of years on the campuses of our country, sororities, fraternities, and social clubs.
You know, we're going to have to wrap up. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Don't forget your thought, because I do want to talk about that, all right? I can't believe 30 minutes went by that fast, huh? When we come back next week, Monday, we're going to wear the same thing. We're going to pick up where we're leaving off at this point. All right? Goodbye. We're out of time.
Understand what went wrong. I know we can find a way. I know we can find a way. I know we can find a way to stand up, stand up, stand up. I know we can find a way. I know we can find. Somewhere in the world today, men have got to stand up strong. Ain't the truth about themselves to understand what went wrong. I know we can find a way. I know we can find a way. I know we can find a way to stand up, stand up, stand up. I know we can find a way. I know we can find.
All right. Thanks, guys. We're back a second week talking about affirmative action. I guess how we feel about it, what to do about it. Is it time out for affirmative action? And my guest today, she stayed overnight, in case you're wondering why she's dressed the same as last week, is Molly Munger. She's with the Legal Defense and Education firm, Fund of the NAACP. And let's just pick up where we left off last week, and we'll take some questions from the audience. Let's talk about the universities. We were talking about the the animosity between the black kids and the white kids, and the things that black kids had to go through. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, I was saying that if you looked at the history of racial tension on campus, the black dorms and the sort of withdrawal of the black kids, you have to put that into the context of what they found when they first started arriving on American university, previously white campuses in large numbers in the early 70s, late 60s and early 70s. And what they found was a system of sororities, fraternities, and other social clubs that never did break their barriers, never did let them in. And that, you know, in some of these schools, you know, sorority and fraternity rush is just, you know, it just consumes, you know, most of the kids for the whole first year. It's a very, very hostile environment for an African American kid who arrives there, and the very first thing he or she is basically told by the system is, you know, we'll give you an education, but if you really think that you can ever be part of our club.
Really?
You know, and that's a hard message, and I think that set things off in a bad. I think what should have happened is that the university should have said, listen, we are going to have one school. We aren't going to have a black dorm and a white dorm. We're going to have, well, that's the wrong way to go. What we're going to do is we're going to not have all these socially exclusive sororities and fraternities excluding the black kids. We're all going to be together here. That's what should have been done, and I think gradually people on campuses are figuring that out, and that the level of, you know, will go down.
But you can't force them to come together like that.
You can't force people to come together in the sense of friendships. Friendships are very personal things.
Right. So if the university said that, it would be like trying to force them to come together.
No, what I'm saying is, what you can say, just like you can say, we aren't going to have some neighborhoods, you know, have little signs around them saying only blacks here. Well, we're not going to have a dormitory that says only blacks here.
Did you know that most blacks do not want to be with whites at those schools? They seem to feel more comfortable with one another, and there was a lot of white people who would welcome them, but they won't come. They won't do it. Did you know that? I
know that does happen, but I also know that when you do polling and you ask black people and white people about their views of living together in an integrated way, white people score a lot lower in terms of being welcoming to black people than black people do about being welcoming to white people.
And why is that?
I think a lot of black people still do have a dream. I think they want to have an integrated society. They want to live together.
But why are they rejected by it? Why do most white people reject them? Because
white people bring a lot of very negative baggage to their interaction with blacks. They haven't been fair to African Americans for hundreds of years. They're having a hard time evolving out of patterns that they've been taught. They're just having a real hard time.
Wow.
And they're not trying as hard as they should.
Trying to do what?
Well, they're not trying to fight their prejudices and their racial history nearly as hard as I think they should.
Really? He has a question, but I want to say this first. Personally, I don't care about white people not trying to fight their racist prejudices or whatever. I don't care if they accept me or don't accept me. And I don't want anyone to pass a law that will make someone accept me. I mean, if they don't want me to be there, fine. You know, the hell with it. Keep it. I'll start my own. Why are we trying to make them do it? I mean, that's what happened in the 60s when we passed this law where we had to go to the same school. We're trying to force people to do something they don't want to do. I don't understand, why is there a group of people out there trying to force this kind of thing to happen when it will never happen?
Well, you and the man who's pushing the Civil Rights Initiative apparently believe the same thing, which is we're never going to have it.
But we will. It will come naturally.
But that's what I think.
Dr. King said that, and I admire him, so I had to borrow this. He said that one day black people would be judged by the content of their character. And what that means is that if we had noble families, if we went to work, if we earned our way, the rest of the world will look at us and they will admire us and they will want to come together with us, those of like mind. But then we have not done that, and I think that's what the white people have a problem with.
Well, I I think that is very, very unfair. There are just enormous numbers of black people in this country every day who get up, go to work, do a great job. You know that 30% of the black people in this country are in poverty? 70% of the black people, well, it's not, what I'm saying is the opposite of what you think I'm saying. I'm not saying there's so many in poverty. White people tend to think all blacks are in poverty.
I do too, sometimes.
They're not. 70% of African Americans get up every day, go to productive work very hard, do a wonderful job, and this whole stereotype.
But those black people who get up every day and go to work and earn their way, take care of their family, have a standard that they live by, they also have white friends.
Well, actually, the statistics don't tend to support that. What the statistics tend to show is that if you're black in America, no matter what you do, for example, here's a statistic for you. You have a black and a white, and you give them the same suit and the same resume and the same credit rating, and you send them out to look for an apartment to rent or a house to buy. 50 to 53% of the time, more than half of the time, the black is turned away.
Yeah.
That's one of the reasons you have so much segregation in housing and why even middle-class blacks can't move to the suburbs.
Let me give you something else that's very shocking, and then I'm taking you. Did you know that if you sent a white man to a black company and a black man to that same company, that most likely the black owner of that company will hire that white man? Did you know that?
There's a study that shows that?
Yeah, my life study. If me and this white guy over here went to a black company to get a job, he's more likely to get that job than I am.
Well, then you agree with me with what I'm saying about the widespread nature of discrimination, and your point is it's so bad that even black people do it.
Yeah, but it's a good reason. I don't blame those black folks for doing it. I think that's where we disagree at. Is that, you know why they do it? Because 9 times out of 10, not all, but there are some, 9 times out of 10, that black guy is going to do worse on the job, be less productive, expect more, treat that black man like with disrespect than that white guy will. And we know that as black people. That's some of the things that we need to work out. And so that's why he will get the job before I will, because he gonna go in there and treat that black man a little better and work a little harder, expecting a little less than I would as a black man.
Well, Jesse,
Did you know that?
I can't support your views on this subject.
I'm 45 years old. I'm telling you, it's true.
Well, I just can't support your views, but I do want to say something that might narrow the gap between us, and that is this. I never like to draw analogies between race and gender discrimination, because I really don't think that what a woman suffers trying to get ahead in a male business is anything, it's not nearly as severe as to be black in America. But I do know this, having been a woman I was a woman lawyer, am still, but for 20 years of my life I was a woman lawyer who was basically in a man's business. I was a federal prosecutor, and I did all these jobs where most of the people who did them were men. And what I learned from that experience is that if you're in a situation where some things happen that are perhaps not exactly the way they should be, and the systems aren't put together exactly as they should be, you can get very upset about it, you can internalize it, you can use it as an excuse for not doing anything, you can let it destroy you, or you can say, I can do this, there's enough opportunity here, there's enough people here who will be fair to me, it's not a problem, and you can keep on keeping on. From the point of view of the individual, what you're preaching is a very helpful philosophy. From the individual point of view, to spend your life focusing on grievances that are being done to you or that were done to you in the past, it's just such mental strain. It really slows you down. What you really need to do to get ahead is keep your eye on the prize. I agree with that.
But don't you think affirmative action disagrees with that?
No, I don't. I think affirmative action, as I say, you still get discriminated against as a black person 50 to 53% of the time that you try to get a house, 20 to 24% of the time you try to get a job, discriminated in schooling, discriminated against in a horrible thing. Somebody finally spots you a few points on a test or gives you a small break. I just don't think you need to feel that somebody's handed life to you on a silver platter. All they've done is they've taken this thin meal that they're feeding you and put, a little parsley on it. And I think that's...
I understand how you see things, but it's not that way. I think that someone has deceived you as to what is the real problem in the black community. And it's not what you think that it is. And hopefully before this night is over, we can give you a little insight as to what is really wrong in the black community. All right? Yes, sir.
I would like to know, as looking at the black community, as we all can see, it does seem to be in a state of shock as far as the family is concerned, the black family itself. How do you think that the black family, particularly the black man, is contributing to the demise of the black situation at the present moment?
Well, the one observation I would make about this idea that we're having the demise of the black family is that in the African American community, single parenthood has been a very common phenomenon for a really, really long time, like all the way back to before emancipation. And what's really happening with the black family is that black families and white families are drawing closer together. The rate of illegitimacy in the white community is rising so much faster than the rate of illegitimacy in the black community that, and I don't like that word.
I know, let me just say, that's not really true, because in the black community, 80% of black women are having babies now without men, whereas it's something like 30 to 20% of the white women are doing it.
This is true, but it's not. This figure's not 80; it's 68.
And last time I looked, it was 80.
No, it isn't. I have those.
67.
All right, fine. 60. I have that number. I have those numbers.
Watts is 80.
I have those numbers. I have. You know, somebody did say that recently. It was wrong.
Did you hear 80?
80 is a myth, but 67, 68, you know.
Is 99 3/4.
I'm telling you. Yeah.
Well, you know, that's not fair. I mean, you go down to a white housing project, you're going to have a lot of problems too. I was looking for these statistics because I do think that they're interesting, and I wanted to read you the numbers. Just a second here. Median income.
Do you think that the reason we're so screwed up has something to do with the weakness of the black man?
Well, I don't.
You don't?
I don't think black men are weak.
What do you think is wrong with them?
Well, I think that they were treated very badly for a long period of years. They were kept in a very bad situation. They had the sense to get out of that plantation system as soon as they could get jobs up north during World War II. I think they went. I think they took their families. I think they tried to keep their families together. I think when they got to the big cities, they went to work in hard jobs and pulled a huge weight, both fighting and dying in World War II and running the industrial effort in World War II. I think after the war, white guys came back and black workers were displaced. I think that's kind of a common story with both black people and women, that whenever things get a little tight, it's the blacks and the women you push out. Frankly, that's what's happening with this affirmative action thing right now.
But you know why? It's because we're so dependent. We need government. If we were to stand up on our own feet when things got tough, we would have built a foundation where we won't be pushed back. I mean, if I'm giving to someone and they're constantly begging and have a handout, and then all of a sudden things got tight for me, of course I'm going to stop giving to that person in order to save for my family and provide. I think that if black men were to get up off their butt and began to be men, it wouldn't happen that way.
Well, I'm not going to be agreeing with you on some of these things.
How would you explain before the civil rights movement, and I know you have a question, someone else?
Yeah.
How would you explain before the civil rights movement, black people were doing better? They created their own schools, universities, they started their own businesses. They did better before the civil rights movement as opposed to the civil rights movement. But hold that, she's jumping up and down. Think about that. You hadn't thought about that before, huh?
I have, yes.
Okay,
I have.
answer that when we come
I
back.
lived through it.
Back in a moment. Back in a moment.
Okay. Oh, it's the first thing.
It's electric.
Bond, the brotherhood organization of a new destiny. Rebuilding the family by rebuilding the man. Call us toll-free, 1-800-411-BOND. That's 1-800-411-BOND.
Okay, we are back. We're talking about affirmative action, and because of time, we're going to move on. What was my question before the break?
Well, you promised me that I would be able to give you these illegitimacy rate numbers because I found them during the break.
Yes, but answer the question first. Why is it that black people were better off before the civil rights movement as opposed to the civil rights movement?
Well, they weren't, at least as far as anything we can measure. In other words, educational attainment levels.
Pardon me, please.
Let her finish that thought. I know you, Bernie, but I want, because see, I know how she's, okay, go ahead, I'm sorry.
At least insofar as anything we can measure. Educational attainment rates were much lower. High school completion, college graduation, all of that was much lower. Income was much lower. Poverty was much higher. It was not as positive a picture according to anything that we can measure. But I think we should talk to this gentleman
Yes,
here.
sir.
Yes, I'm 65 years old, and I was born in 1930. And you know what? Black people was a whole lot better off. Here's more of them finished school,
Yeah.
and more of them had their own business because I lived through it. And then why should I'm 65 years old, and I can't read and write. How come that I get all the money I want ever since I've been here? I ain't never been discriminated against. Ain't no white man never discriminated against me. If he did, I didn't know nothing about it. I create a baby. I can create anything. I don't need the welfare to give me nothing. I don't need no formative action. I'm a man. I'm not no kid. And bell curve was right. You is useless if you ain't got something to take care of yourself. Why am I gonna go beg a white man for a job? How come I can't hire him? I'm an American. And I'm not a black American. I'm a Louisiana American. And I get my own business. How did the white man get his business? And the white folks help me. They've been helping me ever since I've been here, and we respect each other. And you gonna tell me that the worst thing ever could have happened to America was that Civil Rights March? That is the worst thing could ever happen, and you come along and you doing more than Jim Crow, hanging, and everything else, people like you. Because you were saying they need this. I don't care if they hang a mule up there. I am down here to get an education. I don't care about what you think of me. I don't need you to accept me. You don't have to accept me. I'm an American. And if I accept myself, you will. And you gonna give me a welfare check? How come you don't give me how come affirmative action don't get me a business?
Okay.
Do you understand what make a ghetto?
I bet she's thinking, Lord, I didn't have anything to do
Do you
with it.
think, why is it a ghetto?
Let's get a response. Go ahead. Do you
The
understand?
question is, why is there a ghetto?
No, the question is, I know you think, oh my goodness, how am I gonna get out of here? What he's saying, and I agree with him, as a black man, it's a put down to give us something as though we can't make it on our own, just like the white man. The white man has to work hard. Yes, he has a little leeway because his folks have been owning this country for, ever since whenever. But he has to get up, he has to earn his way, he work hard, he disciplines himself, he do what it takes to make a life for himself. But with black men, liberal white people, some white people, and then those black people like the Jesse Jacksons and the Maxine Waters, all those kind of people, they seem to think there's something wrong with us, and they have to give us something because we're not able to stand up on our own 2 feet. So that's what he's offended, that he's looked down on as a man rather than, you understand?
I think I do understand, and as I said before, I have a lot of sympathy with these attitudes as they bear on how an individual lives his life or her life. I think it's very understandable if you live in this kind of system that we've created to just say exactly what our friend here has said, which is, I don't need you. Don't you just get out of my face. I don't want to have anything to do with you. I'm going to have my own life over here, and I don't want you coming in here and trying to intervene in my life. I understand it, but I guess what I'm saying is, first of all, not all black people do feel that way, and I guess it's really almost comes down to a matter of choice.
But you know why they don't? Because they're bums.
Well, just a minute. No, that's not true.
They are. They
Wait a
have
minute.
babies. They don't want to work.
Oh, that is really stereotyping. There are a lot. Wait a minute. There are a lot of. Maybe we can agree on this. Let me put it this way. Wouldn't we all agree that there is not unanimity in the African American community on the subject of integration? Aren't some people in the African American community still looking toward the day that we're going to have unity and integration? And some of them are saying, who needs that? I'm just going to live my own life. Isn't it a split?
Yes, there is.
It is a split. And I guess what I'm saying is, because people have freedom of association in our country, they have freedom of association. I believe in that. It's a very precious right. People have the right to go off and be by themselves in some unstructured way. It's like our example at school. You can't make people have friends. You can avoid giving them a building and letting them take over the whole campus with their party that gets in everybody's face so that it permeates the whole system. But in terms of, can people hang around together? Absolutely. You can never do away with that right. And all I'm saying is, because we have the freedom to choose with whom we want to associate, we have to make it a real choice by being sure that black people who want to associate with white people, and white people who want to associate with black people, and those of us who want to be together in this country can be. You don't like white people, you don't ever have to come and see me. You don't have to have anything to do with me. But because I respect your feeling of wanting to be.
But that's not what he's saying.
But whatever it is, I completely understand it, and I think everybody gets that choice.
No,
but
that's
right
not what
now,
he's saying. What he's saying is that when you have a group of people out there trying to make his life easy by giving him something, he don't want that kind of thing.
Well, that's a different question. Now we've talked about how you have to open up the choice for integration so that those who want it can choose it. That's point one. Now the second point is, well, what do we do about things like welfare and I guess really, isn't it welfare? I mean, when we really talk about this, aren't we talking about welfare?
Affirmative action?
No, wasn't what was really bothering our friend here, wasn't it welfare?
Welfare, affirmative action, liberals.
Wait a minute. I don't put that.
The whole civil rights
movement itself.
All of it, all of them preferences. Look, I don't have no animosity in my heart against no Caucasian, nobody. Did you know what? I'm glad that my background was like it were. Because you know what? I'm a man. I can get the same thing the Caucasian get. I got the same thing that he got. And it was just as many, it was more supposed to be black folks that was rich when I was young than it is now. They own something. And this is what's wrong. And after 64, everything went crazy when people like you and all of them Democratic congressmen and senators that passed civil rights law. Can you define civil rights? They said they're marching for the civil rights. I want to find out who got them. I don't need Martin Luther King to go get nothing for me. I'm mobile.
Okay,
I can go get what I need.
Time is going on. Give it to her. Can you define civil rights?
Civil rights is the process by which we try to make the Equal Protection Clause of the United States and fairness and equality for everybody a reality.
Are you shocked to hear this guy speaking this way?
No.
What do you think about what he's saying? When he said people like you, what does that mean to you?
Well, I think he's wrong. I do think he's wrong about that.
But what do you think he means when he say people like you?
I think that there was a certain comfort in separate and unequal. It was never equal. I understand that being all by yourself, walled off in a ghetto that you can't get out of, you can't go to school with anybody, you can't get out, you're just bottled up in there. I understand that there's a comfort to it in that everybody's kept there and everybody relates to each other, and there was a fabric in the black community in those years that is disturbed when people try to go out and blend. I understand hostility to to that because it's just a matter of being able to imagine how it would feel. On the other hand, it is part of the pain of progress. I mean, we could not go on that way. That was a wrong, evil system, and it was not. We just could not go on that way.
Okay, that's not what he's saying. You're still missing his point, but we don't have time to really get into it anymore. Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to say something pro-affirmative action in a way. I'm not pro-affirmative action in all situations, but I do think we were talking about the universities a while back, and my experience was that I come from a family where education was not important. I was the first person in my family to ever go to college. And I went through in the 70s on an affirmative action program. As I said, no one in my family expected me to go to school at all.
You know what? Hold that for a minute because I want to ask you a question about, are we taking a break or it's over again? My goodness. Okay, we're going to do a part 3 in a minute. Back Monday. Goodbye.
Somewhere in the world today, men have got to stand up strong, think the truth about themselves, to understand what went wrong. I know we can find a way. I know we can find a way. I know we can find